Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and there are approximately 10 days, 20 hours, 38 minutes, and about 54 seconds until the end of 2019. In a moment, I'll be joined by my co-host Grapeviney as we chat with Demon utility Bayley Fritsch. And later tonight, we'll be joined by Demonland match report writer George on the Outer to discuss last weekend's loss to Collingwood, and we'll also ask George how in a year as disappointing as this year has been, how he musters up the energy and the will to write up a review of the game and hand it in within hours of the match ending. But first, Bayley Fritsch.
And then Jaden Hunt just bangs it onto his boot. Long ball. There's Fritsch. Bayley Fritsch on debut. What a way to start your career.
Great effort from McInerney, affected the kick. It might still work for Fritsch. He's a left footer and a talented left footer.
And now for D's one-on-one, ball out the back. Bayley Fritsch put the 1 mid up. Can he get it again as he goes to ground? Flicked it back. Harrison Petty back to Fritsch, and the D's get a goal.
Our guest tonight took the road less travelled to an AFL career. He was overlooked by the Eastern Rangers, and whilst playing Division 4 in the EFL with Coldstream, he was invited to train with Casey in the VFL. It was there in 2017 where he took out the Fothergill Round Medal for Best Young VFL Player, and as a result caught the eye of the Demons, who then selected him with pick 31 in the national draft of that year. He has a pinpoint pass, he's a high flyer, takes a great contested mark for his size and can kick a goal. Welcome to the Demonland podcast, Bayley Fritsch.
G'day guys, thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. As mentioned in the intro, you were overlooked to play under-18s football, playing in Division 4 in the EFL for Coldstream. Did you ever dream that one day you'd be playing AFL, let alone finals at the MCG?
No, I guess as a kid, you've always got that dream to, I guess, one day, be running around on the MCG. But for it to become a reality and then play some finals footy last year was pretty surreal, to be honest. But it was unbelievable and good fun.
Bayley, you made the grade the hard way, driving for hours at a time to get to training whilst working full time. Did that stand you in better stead for your career than perhaps if you'd gone the sort of the easier route that most players go through, where you have everything on a platter for you?
Yeah, I guess I don't really take it for granted, knowing that I guess when I was an electrician, waking up at 5 in the morning, heading off to work, and then, as you say, going out to play VFL 3 times a week, not getting home till 10 o'clock at night. So, everything I do at the club, I do it to its full potential, I guess, and, not leaving any stone unturned, just trying to get the most out of myself every day and, I guess, living this dream as long as I can.
A number of clubs noticed your form in the VFL. There was the D's, and I believe West Coast were keen for your services. What was the feeling like when your name was finally called?
Yeah, I was just at home with just my immediate family and a college mate. That was it was a pretty weird feeling. It didn't really feel real till I guess the Monday when I was in at the club. As soon as that name got read out, it was there was a lot of emotions, that's for sure.
Bayley, you handled the transition to AFL extremely well. How much of an adjustment was it going from where you were playing in the EFL with Coldstream to VFL and then to AFL, where they're obviously a lot bigger bodied players?
Yeah, I guess with anything, it takes a little bit of time to adapt. But I reckon probably in those pre-seasons, going from local footy to VFL and then from VFL to AFL, when you're training with that quality of player during the pre-season for 3-4 months, you just sort of get used to it, and then you play a couple of practice matches. Like I played the 2 JLTs last year leading into the game. I played a few practice matches when I first come out of local footy in the VFL, so I guess it probably helped with the transition. But once you sort of play a couple of games, you sort of get used to the speed, and it's all systems go from there.
Bayley, we love a first kick, first goal player, and although you didn't quite achieve that, well, you kicked a point with your first kick, you certainly followed that up with a great mark and a goal with your second kick in front of a big crowd at the G. How was that feeling?
Yeah, that first one would have been nice to go through, but when I took that mark and in front, I thought, I can't miss this one, can I? But when I pulled that mark down, against Geelong, it was unreal. The boys got around me, so it was good.
You kicked a very healthy 42 goals for Casey before starting your career at the D's, where you kicked 17 alongside the likes of Hogan and Tommy McDonald. You then transitioned to the back line later in the season. What was the impetus for that move, and had you played much footy down back?
No, so I played pretty much all my junior careers in the forward line, pretty much my whole footy career in the forward line, to be honest. It was probably more just last year I played a little bit on a wing, and I guess when you're playing as a wingman, you're heading down back to help out with the back line, and I think the coach has probably seen just a couple of things that they potentially thought could be good in me and playing as a backman. So they tried that. I think we might have got an injury late in the year. I can't quite remember who it was, but I ended up going to play in that back seven in the back rotation, and obviously it was good learning, and it was only going to help my footy. But now coming back this year, I'll obviously play a little bit of back. That's probably more from an injury point of view, a little bit of wing, but now back down forward, which has been good fun for the past 4 or 5 weeks.
One of the major talking points among D's fans last September was your omission from the team that travelled to Perth for the preliminary final. How disappointing was that for you, and how have you learned from that experience?
Yeah, obviously it was really disappointing, but it was the best thing for the team on that given week, and I guess I was doing everything I can in that. If we had got through in the VFL Grand Final the next day to, I guess, put my name up for selection for the Grand Final, but obviously that didn't eventuate. But it was obviously, if you put things in perspective, it was my first year. I'd played 23 games, so if you had said that to me at the start of the year, I would have definitely taken that. But definitely I was disappointed, and it sort of, I guess, maybe gave me a little bit of drive in the pre-season, but not a whole heap.
After playing most of the year in defence, you will move back into the forward line due to season-ending injuries to Tommy Mack and Sam Wiedemann. Since moving forward, you've kicked 12 goals, 10. You've taken 41 marks in 5 games, including hauls of 14 marks against the Eagles and 10 marks each in the last 2 games. In a year where the connection between the midfield and the forward line, has been widely criticised, you seem to be thriving as a forward target. Besides yourself going forward, what's changed to get that connection?
Yeah, I guess as a team, it's probably been one of our main priorities, that forward, 50 to 70 connection. I guess since I've been down there, we've all been working really hard together, working together as a group. And obviously working pretty closely with Jade Rawlings. He's been unbelievable for not only me, but the whole forward group and our ball movement in general. It's still patchy, but I think it's definitely getting more consistent every week since probably the second half of the year.
Do you have a preference for playing forward, and do you think you'll remain there next season when Tommy Mack and Sam return?
I love playing forward, but I think I've always sort of said wherever Goody and the coaching staff need me to play, I'm happy to run out there on the weekend. But I think going forward potentially there'll be maybe forward, maybe mid or wing role, something like that. But as I said, just wherever Goody needs me, I'm happy to do.
A lot has been made of the late start to our pre-season as a result of finals last year. We had a lot of off-season surgeries and the interrupted pre-seasons to many players, and that having an impact and making us sort of have a slow start to the year. That's the view from us as outsiders. For you, as someone on the inside, how much of a role do you think that's had in the season this year? Yeah,
obviously it's not ideal, but we're not here to make excuses. we all, I guess, going into pre-season, round one, although we had some interrupted pre-season, we were ready to go. It obviously hasn't panned out to the way we wanted, but we've been working real hard on week to week on our game, and unfortunately it hasn't quite been as consistent as we would have liked. But I guess in the past probably 6 to 8 weeks, although the results haven't gone our way, we've definitely showed more signs of playing Melbourne footy, but yeah, just not consistent enough to win a game. But hopefully we can, I guess, build some momentum in the second half of the last 2 games, and take that into pre-season and season 2020.
How confident are you that we can bounce back next year and rediscover the form of 2018?
Super confident. I guess with another pre-season, I guess you can't really. This game doesn't owe you anything, and as we've found out this year, you can go from the top to the bottom pretty quickly. So we'll be doing everything we can in this upcoming pre-season, and to be fit and firing and ready to go come round 1 2020.
Just a couple of last questions for you, Bayley, and we're extremely grateful for your time this evening. What are the boys doing to keep morale and spirits up during such a dismal season?
If you're around the club right now, you probably wouldn't know that the results aren't going our way. So I think that's one good part about the footy club. It's everyone's still up and about, and we're all helping each other, getting each other through, and trying to better ourselves every day we're in at the club, and trying to bring our best out on game day.
And finally, Bayley, I've got to ask you, what's it like being the greatest player of all time to ever play the AFLX format? I've copped a bit of crap about over that, but it's not too bad. I guess to win the 2 premierships is good fun, and it's unfortunate that we can't go around again next year. But it's a bit of a laugh. All right, Bayley, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to a much better year for the D's next year. Thank you very much for your time. No, too easy, guys. Thanks for having me on. All right, thanks, Bayley. That was Bayley Fritsch. Thanks again to Bayley and the MFC for his time tonight. We really appreciate it. Grapeviney has had to bail on me tonight for the rest of the program. He's not feeling well, so he's going to have a nice little rest. And he tells me that he's going to be playing the last 2 games, and then we'll go into postseason surgery, and we'll be right for round 1. But joining me tonight, as I mentioned earlier, is his first time on the Demonland podcast. He is the Demonland match report writer. It's George on the outer. Good evening, George. How are you going?
Good evening, Andy, and thanks for the invitation. I'm sorry to hear Grapeviney's not with us tonight, but a last-minute injury is pretty typical of the Melbourne side and supporters, so it's a pity that he's not here as well. And like the Melbourne interchange bench, I don't think that I'll be as good a replacement as Super Mercado has been over the last year. But again, thank you for the invitation. No, not a problem. Thank you very much for joining us. Yes, Grapeviney was our mystery injury of the week, and as you said, we're used to that every single week. There's always someone who just pops up when least expected. If you'd like to join the program tonight and join George and I to discuss any of the topics that we talk about, you can give us a call 03 9016 3666. That's 9016 3666. Skype us Demonland 31. If you're listening to the show live, you can also join us in the chat room where you can ask questions or post comments. Just head over to demonland.com/podcast. If you're listening to the show later on at your leisure via SoundCloud on demonland.com or via Apple or an Android podcasting app, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive some updates when a new show drops. Don't forget to leave a favourable review, as many of you have done, to help more people
find us. We're also on Spotify, so you can get the show that way. Go to demonland.com to find the links to your preferred method of listening. On social media, follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Demonland31, Twitter @Demonland, Instagram @Demonland31, or go to YouTube and search for Demonland Podcast. And you can listen to some of the interviews that we've conducted with current and past players and coaches, and Bayley Fritsch's interview will be up there very shortly. If you love talking about the D's 24/7 all year round, join us on demonland.com and you can chat with other D's fans about this great club. Now, George, with all that out of the way, let's dissect. This is the part of the week that I've been dreading this year.
This is always painful, isn't it?
It's very painful, and I know every time you submit your reports to me, you always write, hope you'll be able to get up to do the podcast. And I must ask you, how do you, within hours of the match ending, how are you able, especially in a year like this, how are you able to get up and write about what you see?
It's all very easy, actually, Andy. What I've learnt is don't write anything straight after the game. At least wait a couple of hours until the dust settles and the emotions have calmed down a little bit to actually do a proper analysis of what's been seen and what wasn't seen. I don't think I'd be very good writing immediately after the game. And there's probably plenty of evidence on Demonland about that from other posters, particularly this last season. So I avoid that at all costs, and mainly when I'm writing, I'm trying to focus on particular points through the game. I was very fortunate a couple of years ago to be asked to be an assistant coach for my nephew's football team. What that taught me was not so much about coaching, but when you're the assistant, you've actually got to look at what's going on the ground. So that's really heightened my interest in the game of football itself, rather than just watching where the ball's going. You've got to be looking behind the play and where the players are being positioned. So it was a great learning experience for me in that situation.
Well, it's good that you mentioned I should keep that down. We've got a call coming in now. I usually have the calling volume down, but we'll take this call. Good evening. You're on the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Barb.
Oh, sorry. Can you just repeat that?
Barb.
Oh, Barb. How are you doing, Barb?
Good, thanks.
That's good. What would you like to talk about tonight?
Oh, I just thought I was going to hear an interview with Bayley Fritsch.
Oh,
so it doesn't matter.
Have you did you not listen to the interview? We just completed it.
Sorry. Okay, I was too late. That's okay.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barb. If you download the podcast during the week, you'll get to listen to that. It'll be up tonight.
Okay.
All right.
You.
Thanks, Barb. All right, that was Barb, everyone. Thank you for calling.
Wasn't that a great interview from Bayley? For a kid who's playing out at Coldstream, driving himself all that way to get to training and finishing up playing in finals. What a great experience for a young kid, and it shows the value of hard work to get you where you want to be. So
it is a great story. Particularly, he was an electrician, so like as he said, he was getting up at 5 a.m. Working all day, going to training, not getting home at night till like 10 o'clock at night. Just an amazing story. So it's fantastic that he's been so successful, and at the moment, probably one of our better players. And there aren't too many of them.
Indeed, and I think that's a sad reflection, unfortunately, of the state of the playing group at the moment, of who is available. That we're depending on a second year, third year type player to hold the forward line effectively, and at the same time we've got a 19-year-old Harry Petty in his sixth game, I think, doing a similar sort of job. That the Bicky barrel is really, really right at the very bottom. Although both of those players look to be well equipped for the future and may well represent a real shining light to come out of this season. But we're right at the bottom when we've got such young and undeveloped players taking up key roles at the moment. So.
Well, Bailey's been fantastic, but I didn't realise till I looked at his stats the last couple of weeks since he's gone back forward, particularly his marking stats. The 14 against the Eagles and the 10 marks the last 2 weeks. It's fantastic, and particularly in a year where we've really struggled, as I mentioned in interview, is that the connection between the midfield and the forward line, having Bayley Fritsch, who isn't a key position forward, to be the one who's taking all these marks. And he's such a good contested mark. He's so good overhead. His arms are stick thin, and he's able to take these marks. He's just a shining light on a.
It's incredible. We'd be happy with any forward to be taking 10 marks in a game, but again, someone who's not assigned as a key forward to be able to do that's even more fantastic for us, particularly as we go into the next season, and hopefully we've got a couple of bigger bodies up there, and instead of Bayley Fritsch having to take on the likes of the Hearns and McGovens and in the back line, that he'll be picking up someone who's a number 3 defender rather than the 1 and 2 defenders that he's currently doing. Same with Harrison Petty. He's been very impressive in these last couple of weeks, and like I said, I think people forget that he's only 19 years of age. It's quite incredible. So,
not only is he 19 years of age, but he's also not a forward, and he's been played as a forward because we've needed him there, same as we've had to throw Bailey back, even though Bailey is a forward. And it'll be interesting to see next year what happens once T-Mac's back, once Weed's back in the team. What the dynamics of the forward line, if they sort of try Petty there as maybe a third tall. I'm not sure they're going to go with 3 talls in the forward line. I would say you'd have to keep Bailey down there, but it'll be interesting to see what happens next year.
Yeah, I think Petty's really starting to stamp a position down the forward line. He really is a strong mark. He came from, I remember his first game against St Kilda last year. It was absolutely appalling. He was thrown to the wolves again because we had no other options at the time. But for a kid of that age to come back from that experience and then turn up and be forced into the forward line and show the form that he has, I think he's got a real future down there for us. And it needs to, like a lot of these younger players, needs to put on a bit of weight and strength, and he could well be the forward that we've been looking for quite a while. So fingers crossed in that respect.
We've had our own injury issues this year, and I think it's fair to say that we're still playing with a team stacked with, as you mentioned, with top-up players. But the Pies, they also have a huge list of outs. Obviously, we've been impacted by injuries more consistently throughout the year than they have, but they were depleted on the weekend. And prior to the game, I actually thought we might have been a sneaky chance to knock them off, or perhaps, and dent their top 4 aspirations. But then I was thinking if we lost to them, the wider football community, and which we did, the wider football community would laugh at us and say we lost to a second-rate Collingwood. But then, if they won, then they'd say we only beat a second-rate Collingwood. So we were in a bit of a no-win situation, and we ended up not winning. So
yeah, I think the other fortunate thing for us this weekend is Essendon and North Melbourne both turned on some performances which distracted the media in a rather big way. So we were a minor problem for the writers to find something to write about this week compared to those particular teams' performances. But I think it was just as interesting that Essendon in particular have run into the same problem as us, that when you lose your major positional players in the side, it is devastating in a competition which is so even these days. Any side, probably apart from the Suns, any side really can beat any other side on their day. And when you lose those critical players in the side, you're in deep, deep strife. And I don't think that, it's a pity Super Mercado's not around. Hopefully he's listening, but he might be able to tell us whether a Melbourne side in the past has ever had 21 consecutive goals kicked against them, as Essendon did this weekend.
I'll have to ask him that one, and maybe we'll bring it up next week. But like Essendon, they got absolutely thumped this week. I think on a plus side to us, we've only been thumped really once this year with the 80 points, and GWS, I think we were 40 or something points. But other than that, we haven't really been destroyed by teams, which I guess is a plus to us. But we still aren't. Those wins are still elusive to us at the moment.
And again, that's not unexpected in a way that the competition is that close, and you bring in not second-rate players, but second-string players into the side. They're just unable to perform in the same way that your first 22 are able to, and it's when the game gets to that point and those critical points in the game where you just need to hit that player, you just need to kick that goal, you just need to take the opportunity, and the first 22 players do that, but the guys who are number 26 on the list, or in our case might be number 30 on the list, are incapable of doing it, and that's why we just keep losing these games. I think it's just the lack of skill that we currently have on the field because of our circumstances. It's a real pity after last year, but I think a lot of people need to recognise that that is the biggest single factor in the side. I'm not really interested in the coaching arguments. We saw what happened to Ray Shaw this week.
Ray Shaw
this week after his appointment as a full-time coach, and probably in his first game he gets thrashed like that. The coaches don't have that much influence as much as skilled players on the field.
I did see a stat on Demonland. I wasn't able to verify this, and I guess I could have, but I didn't feel like going through the list. But someone said, someone on Demonland mentioned that Collingwood only had 6 out of their grand final side, and we had 9 from out of our preliminary side. Does that sound right to you? I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't look at that. But more importantly, from the Collingwood side, when you got players like Pendlebury and Sidebottom running around, we can talk about the Sidebottom situation a bit later, perhaps as well.
Yeah.
But these are really skilled, experienced players who've got those old heads that just know how to play. And really, look, let's face it, Collingwood are a top 4 side. They do have their injuries, but they're a top 4 side because they've got good players in their side as well. We haven't been able to get our equivalent players on the field. It's not a surprising outcome. So,
the last week, people were saying that the Tigers. This is just a point. B-Man mentioned in the chat room that we only lost by 18 points. Now,
yes,
last week the Tigers. People said the Tigers were in second gear. This week, we scored more in the last quarter than in the previous 3 quarters. And that was once the game was, I think you said in your report that it was once the game was well and truly lost. Did the scoreboard flatter us? Did the Pies put the Q in the rack? Or
I don't think the Pies put the Q in the rack. I think we started to play a little bit more freely than what we had in the first 3 quarters. I think there was also a reticence to actually, as they use the term, take on the game. Players suddenly started kicking for goal instead of looking for a better option inside 50. It was just a little bit more freedom available that I think our players took rather than Collingwood backed off. There was no reason for Collingwood to back off. They're looking for a top 4 position, and percentage is critical to them. Nathan Buckley would have been furious in a way with the last couple of scores on their behalf. So the other thing is, once again, when we get to the end of the game, the younger leagues are still running, and we've got a reasonably good contingent of those guys. But look, a loss is a loss. There's little that we can do about that now. We all wish it was a win, but as you said earlier, we've only really lost 1, maybe 2 games this season by a sizable amount. We're very, very close. We're not going to get any better this year. We may have a bit more luck this coming weekend, because Sydney are just as decimated as we've been. So it'll make for an interesting matchup and an interesting way that the game sort of pans out.
We'll talk about Sidebottom now. Why was nobody on Sidebottom? He was allowed to roam around the ground all alone all game. He had 23 uncontested possessions out of his 28, and this led to 8 score involvements. Surely the coach's box was aware of this. Why was nothing done to curb his influence? We had one of our wingers, whether it was Salem or Jones, dropping back to the halfback flank side of the square in order to create that extra man in defence. There was no change to this tactic throughout the game, and that allowed Sidebottom to go unmanned. This was playing to every man and his dog. Collingwood exploited it, and yet no change was made in the box. I'm sure they were aware of it, and there must have been a reason why. And I think there was a Demonlander in one of the threads that sort of gave his reasons why. How did it, from your perspective, how did you see it?
I picked it up at the first bounce, and I don't think we got to see the effects of it until the second and third quarter, simply because there was only 1 goal scored in that first quarter. So that meant there was no a return to the centre and ball up. What I was impressed was that the Collingwood coaching staff picked it up, and instead of rotating people off the bench onto the wings that most clubs generally do, they positioned Sidebottom there to be permanent for the whole game. Watching us, as you said, rotating off, taking that winger out and putting him in the half-back flank to create the extra man in defence. Sadly, it sends another message that, in a way, because Collingwood obviously didn't drop the extra man back in defence on their side of the equation. We went defensive rather than trying to attack and win the game. But what was really disappointing was that in the second and third quarter, it was very, very obvious that there wasn't anyone within 25 metres of Sidebottom at those centre bounces. And then the question became, well, when it's not a centre bounce, who's actually on him? And it's not surprising that he was free of a Melbourne player virtually for the whole game. And you just can't leave that sort of talent unattended. And, it was critical. 23 uncontested possessions. It's just, it's not surprising that he just kept driving the ball towards their forwards, and eventually they score, of course, as a result of that. But I was surprised that there was no equal reaction until probably the last centre bounce in the last quarter. But they were allowed to get away with it for too long, as far as I was concerned.
It was D. Spencer. I'll just read some of what he wrote. The Sidebottom factor. Sidebottom played most of the game as a wing and parts of it as a half forward. Both times he was left alone at stoppages. Let's look at why. On the wing, Melbourne made the coaching move to drop a wingman to the edge of the square to cover a halfback, and then run a halfback in at centre half bounces. Why? Because the Pies' centre square midfield is faster than ours and really dangerous from the middle. Adam Treloar, who broke the game open a couple of times in the middle quarters in transition play, was minded at stoppages by Harm and stopped from those centre square bursting runs. Grundy, who plays like an extra midfielder, was held up. Brayshaw, Viney, Petraka, etc., were punished for lack of pace or defensive effort, and we won the centre clearances 8-5. The Eagles don't have to tag Treloar because their inside midfield setup features Yo and Shuey, who are both super quick. For them, it makes sense to sit on Sidebottom. It doesn't mean it's the case for us. Until the last 2 weeks, Sidebottom has had a mediocre season for his talents, whilst Treloar has been the most prolific midfielder in the comp and is using the ball better. If Harms plays on Sidebottom, or if we left the front of the square open, we've got Treloar running straight to the Pies forward line without pressure. Then he says, could JKH, Dunkley or Corey Wagner be sent directly to Sidebottom? Maybe. Would they have really done the job of stopping him? Almost certainly not. So I can see what they're saying. They sort of sacrificed and allowed Sidebottom to run riot so that they could curb sort of the influence of some of the other players, in particular Treloar. But I don't know. I think we could have put somebody on him.
I agree, and I think the other was very good points made by D. Spencer. The other thing that I wish they had changed, while that half-back flanker and/or centre half-back was running into the centre, Collingwood had a player directly on his shoulder, so all that was happening was they were taking two more players into the centre square. Neither of them ever got the ball effectively, but it gave the Collingwood players with Sidebottom just sitting out at the side always an outlet of some sort. Once again, I would have thought that the coaching staff would have tried to change something up, because it was pretty obvious to all the fans, certainly in our area. The calls of, can somebody just get on him? Anybody, someone, because he was allowed to roam free, not just on that wing, but like I said, after the stoppage. If you consider that originally, say, a Jones or a Salem was on him, well, does he then give up the idea of going into that extra man in defence and run up the ground to try and get match up with Sidebottom? I think that's a hard call. So I think the Collingwood coaching staff in that particular case really did us over very well.
Our lack of defensive running has been a problem all year. Can this be fixed in the off season?
What we need to do is get our defence and our players actually running. There's again, I'll bring it back to the injury situation. Yeah. I think we've had not just injuries of players who can't get on the field. I think we've been playing a lot of players who are not up to scratch in terms of fitness and or injuries themselves. I'm pretty convinced that players like Brayshaw and Tommy Mack, Melcham, even in the last couple of weeks since he's come back, they're just not what they are capable. They haven't been playing as well as they have been in the past. Tommy Mack, for example, up until the bye situation, couldn't jump off the ground, from my observations. So again, it comes back to this injury situation. We've just been plugging holes, trying to put anybody, as long as they're breathing, into the position, and it really does hurt us, and that's why the defensive running's what becomes obvious to us. The guys have got nothing left in the tank, if they ever had anything in the tank in the first case. For some players, I think there's a secondary problem that occurs when the guys can't run, is particularly in the midfield, and we saw it this week where the Collingwood mids, I think the 5 Collingwood mids had a total of 5 critical errors in total, whereas the Melbourne mids, 4 of them, we had 18 critical errors in the same area of the ground. When you're giving the ball to the opposition in the middle of the ground, it kills you, because you've just got to cover those opposition players streaming away with the ball in hand. It's very difficult to do that when you're playing in that particular role.
You mentioned the critical errors. That was our midfield. Oliver 7, Brayshaw 6, Harms 3. That's 16 from just those 3 players. And I believe it was in your report you compared that to the Collingwood mids, and you singled out Treloar, Sidebottom, Phillips, Pendlebury and Adams. The 5 players had 5 errors between them. So, 16 from 3 players to 5 from 5. It's a big difference. And
yeah, it certainly is, and it really hurts in the middle these days. The way the game's played, if you're giving it up in the middle, and people, unfortunately, and spectators complain bitterly about the back line, but when the ball's coming out of the middle, because we've had so many turnovers from that midfield group, be that around the ground or from centre bounces, it just kills the defenders. The ball keeps coming in. Yeah. It's not surprising that eventually the dam wall breaks.
The old-fashioned manning up is dead and buried in the age of zones. Zoning, I think, is killed us on the weekend. We've let opposition, as you said, just roll out of defence as well from kick-ins. They just short passed all the way down the line, and we weren't prepared to man up, or by the time someone had to leave their man to get to the contest, they'd left the man they just left, and the ball just went over their head to the next guy down the line, and rinse repeat. It just happened all day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, it comes back to that fitness situation, and when you're trying to run zone type defences, and this is the case in basketball and in soccer as well. There's nothing like having a consistent group of players playing together who know exactly what the other ones are doing. You look at the defences of Geelong, for example, or West Coast. They never seem to have the injuries down the back in the same way that we've had, and their zones are tight and hard because they know exactly what each player is going to do in a particular situation. We haven't had that consistency, and it's very hard. We've been exposed in that area. Our backline in particular, I think we've only had one game where we've had May and Lever and Hibbert and Salem and Jetta playing together out of the games that we've played so far. There's no consistency. It's not surprising it breaks open so easily.
I thought there was a little less of our chaos ball game this week. We slowed it down a little bit, but obviously poor disposal, poor decision-making, letting us down. I could see that sometimes there were guys who would run hard to create space and they were then often ignored. Players are either too scared to make the wrong decision or they're confused about which option to take, which might be because of the change in the game plan or the tempo. They might have just lost trust or confidence in teammates, or they just simply lack, the ability to execute like basic skills.
It was interesting, and I'd be interested to hear your comments on it. The Paul Roos observation, I think, about the moth to the flame story that was put up during the week.
Yeah, well, I'll play the audio from that. If you haven't seen the footage, it just relates to footage from there was a kick out of defence that sort of went to a contest. We had about 70 players around that contest, but no one on the outside, basically. And we had Brayshaw not manning up on his opponent Pendlebury, expecting the ball because we had the numbers around the ball. He was expecting us to get it, flick it out to him. Then he's off. But unfortunately, we lost that contest and the ball got flicked out. So I'll play the audio. Ended up with a Pendlebury goal, but I'll play the audio and have a listen to what Gerard Healy, Gary Lyon, and Paul Roos had to say.
To be swift at Melbourne, and they're probably going to have to be deep. But the one thing that absolutely has to change is this be to the honeypot scenario. We've been showing this vision for the last 2 years, even before they really got in a roll. And if you have a look at this, Brayshaw is on a bloke called Pendlebury. Now, the ball is in dispute. You can't have a leg rope that long against a guy that is that great. Have a look at the outside. So many Melbourne blokes on the inside, and some not even going to the contest. Well, Pendlebury, he gave you a lesson there, young Brayshaw, and it's something that you need to address. Not a great year, he needs to respond.
That's indicative. They have just stopped thinking about, and they start thinking about like next year, or they're worrying about their own, how they're going to get belted. That's not playing the game on its merit right there. That's giving up on the game. Like that's just, I'll just go and get the footy because that's what's going to help me. If I get possession, that'll help me. Instead of going, is that the right thing? No, we've spoken about this a lot. No, I'll back off. I mean, that's the sort of thing that's one of a myriad.
Yeah, I was there live on the weekend. I couldn't believe how lazy Melbourne's team was. I mean, you look at the lack of speed as soon as that ball got outside. I mean, I was really, really surprised at the pointing, the standing in the zone, the lack of movement, the lack of effort, the lack of speed on transition was...
What's the starting point? What's the message from Simon Goodwin on the exit plan, and what's the starting point for the way they're going to play round one or first training session in later this year?
Well, I think it's an opportunity. That's the way they've got to look at it. They've got to say, guys, we're back on 1st of November or 5th of November, whatever it is. You'd love to see some of your senior players front up for those early sessions. And that's the statement that I'd be looking for if I was Simon.
Yeah, I totally agree with him when you look at the vision. That was just one contest, but it's happening all the time, and it wasn't just this week. It's been happening sort of all year, and it's a bit of a worry.
And indeed it is. And I think that was beautifully highlighted in that, if you want to look at it, that piece of video. Once again, there were a good number of Melbourne players, like Roos was pointing out, just standing around looking at, in that particular case, Sidebottom getting the ball and getting it out to the Collingwood players on the outside. It's all very well having people going into these contests, but you've got to provide some sort of firstly defensive pressure on the outside, and then be responsible for your immediate opponent. That Brayshaw was expecting it to come our way because we had so many people there, but you can't let someone like Pendlebury off the rope because he will and can and did really burn you really badly. So, and
it wasn't just Pendlebury; there were two other players around him as well that could have easily taken the ball, and there was no one within cooey of them. And it wasn't just in those. That was a kick out of defence from us, and the kick wasn't great as well, which is also something that's damning about our game at the moment. But the Pies, I think, just set up better at stoppages. They always had one man out the back or the side to act as a receiver to get the quick ball out, and then they were away, and we were just chasing tail. If at all they were chasing tail, because there are times when some of our players don't chase. And I think what we really need is a class outside runner or two. I'm not the first person on Demonland to say that.
Yeah, and once again, in that video, you can see the positioning beautifully of the Collingwood players out the back of the contest. So I think it was Axis of Bob, one of the Demonland posters, called certain players extractors. I think we've got a good number of those. Viney and Oliver in particular are very good at getting the ball out. Collingwood know that they've got people like Sidebottom and Pendlebury's not so much an extractor, Treloar is, who can get the ball out and be confident about getting it out. And they know that when they do get the ball, there's someone always out the back to be able to receive. I don't know who our player is in that role. When you really look at it, Brayshaw maybe. I don't think he's a sprinter by any stretch of the imagination, but the surety that the Collingwood players have of being able to move the ball safely to the outside and then really spread and cause the damage, I think I think the Collingwood coaching team had done a very good analysis of the way that we play and set up appropriately to beat us at our own game.
Collingwood kicked 7 unanswered goals on either side of half-time, highlighting that fact that we can't play 4 quarters of footy. I believe 5 goals came from turnovers, from sloppy disposal again. Scoring from turnovers has reared its ugly head again. Was it 49 points from turnovers? I think Collingwood scored correct, 70 in total. So that's well over half, 3/4 of their score from our turnovers. That just has to be ripped out of our game because it cost us against St Kilda. It's cost us again this week.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme. But I have to come back to the quality of the players. The turnovers are coming from the second stringer type players, and it really kills you in the way the game's played these days. You miss that kick, you miss the target, you miss the handball, you handball or kick to someone's feet instead of onto their chest. The turnover happens, and almost invariably it goes straight down the other end for a goal because teams have set up their structures in the anticipation that you're actually going to hit that player. And we can't at the moment. We haven't got the quality on the field to be able to do that consistently enough. And even though that's still happening, we're only losing these games by small margins relatively. So there's a positive in it once we can replace those second string players with more competent ones, either coming back from injury or we're near at the end of the season very shortly through the drafting and or trading period.
Also we've got to be able to impact the scoreboard from set shots. We continued the narrative of 2019 with 6 set shots from inside 50, 0 goals. Our opponents are sinking goals from the boundary. They did last week. They've done it this week again. Also, I think, and I've been saying this to Grapevine all year, I have a real problem. I don't think we have many players that can snap a goal from 30 metres out. There's no penetration in our snapping. We snap and it falls short and someone marks it on the line, and you see Pendlebury being able to snap a ball from 30 or 40 metres that goes through goal height. I don't know. I just have a problem with that. I notice it all the time. All our snaps always appear to fall short, but the set shot kicking for goal has been terrible this year.
Yeah, and the set shot kicking this week alone would have won us the game or not. I counted 6 set shots inside 50, which failed to score. Gawn missed, Melcham missed, Petrarca missed, and Fritschy missed a few as well. That was enough to win us the game if we'd nailed those. And they weren't difficult ones. They weren't ones from the boundary like Collingwood were able to consistently do this week. But it has been another story of throughout the whole season. I don't know what to do about set shot kicking. When you look at the capabilities of people in the past, like the Matthew Lloyds and the Tony Locketts, they had very good technique, consistent technique every single time they shot the goal. I'm not sure that enough practice is put in these days at that skill. I'm always constantly amazed at AFL level how players can miss shots at goal, and let's face it, the goal posts are a long way apart for what they're trying to do. If you put an NBL player or an NBA player on the 3-point line, they'll hit the target 9 times out of 10. I don't think AFL players, as a general rule, are capable of getting the same sort of percentages from directly in front, even of 35 metres out. And we're certainly a good example of that at the moment.
I'm sure I read somewhere that the players don't practice goal kicking so much at training to the extent that they used to, as in just having set shot after set shot after set shot due to overworking, certain muscles in the leg. So maybe that's a problem. Maybe they need to get back to the basics.
What would be best a few more hamstring injuries or kicking a few more goals as a result of skills?
Well, we certainly, if we're going to talk of hamstring injuries, maybe we talk about Stephen May. When Stephen May's fit, he's demonstrated to me why we went so aggressively to get him. However, are you worried about the fact that he's done his hamstring 3 or 4 times this season? And is that a sign of things to come? No use having a beast like him sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, I certainly hope that's not the case. I'm hoping that it was associated with his physical condition when he turned up at the club, apparently. Hamstring injuries tend to be recurring, particularly in season. The good thing about the injury list that we've had is that over the whole season, I think there's only been 3 players who've actually had soft tissue type injuries in hamstrings and groins. So we must be doing something right in that area. So I'm hoping that Mays is an individual problem rather than something that we're going to face across the whole side. When you look at the hamstring injuries that are the list of hamstrings at Collingwood, for example, they're the people I think should be looking at who's their conditioning coaches more so than people are claiming about our Dave Misson and co, although Dave's now moving on.
Well, he is moving on. Hopefully the guy who's replacing him, which he has good credentials, hopefully we don't see an increase in some soft tissue injuries with the change of regime.
Indeed.
Christian Petrarca, I think he's had a solid year. He continues to impress week in, week out. Obviously we'd like him to work on his set shot kicking, and would love to see him be a bit more consistent over 4 quarters. But I think he's just impressing week in, week out this year.
I think we're starting to see at the end of this season some really good glimpses of what Petrarca can be. As a young player, I think he's starting to get far more confidence in his own abilities and strength, and that he now is starting to break those tackles that previously he was unable to. And I'm hoping that he starts to take the game on a little bit more, have a little bit more confidence and a little bit more greed about going for goal. He's previously been almost reticent to go for it himself first up rather than trying to pass it off to someone else. I think one of the posters some time ago mentioned this is probably from this basketball background where you're constantly trying to find a better player sitting under the ring to get the ball to rather than shooting from outside. He needs to start doing the shooting himself when he's inside range. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of what we've all hoped for with Petracca, and I hope that's the case.
We love a first kick, first goal player. I mentioned it to Bayley Fritsch. What are your thoughts on 589th kick, first goal player? Omac joins that illustrious club. Your thoughts on Omac's maiden game as a forward with also some stints in the ruck?
I think the thoughts were it is indicative of where we are at the moment in terms of who we've got to put into particular roles. Omac was playing forward because honestly we have no one else.
Yeah.
I was very pleased for him because he really did acquit himself quite well in the role, and it was a great fillip, I hope, for him to be able to get that goal just from his personal situation, because certainly in the first half of the season, and I know there are heaps and heaps of critics on Demonland about Omac down the back line, but those same people seem to forget that in the first half of the season we had Omac and Frost as our two main defenders, and that was it. We had players all around not there, not available or injured. So they were getting, he and Frost were getting a beating week after week, and obviously shot his confidence and went back to the VFL. So I'm very glad that he's come back and has some positives for him out of this season. I don't think he's quite the answer in terms of a forward, but like I said, I hope that it does something for him, and he can be that sort of player who may well be able to either fill a spot down the forward line or fill a spot down the back line as needed. You certainly need those sort of players during the course of the season.
I think we just made Bin Man's, who's in the chat room, his day by mentioning Omac. So the shout out to you, Bin Man. I know he's a favourite of yours. George, would you care to weigh in on the debate of Jones playing on next year? He's had one tackle in the last 2 games, 4 in the last 5 games. I guess you have to take emotions out of it. Of course, the heart wants him given all that he's given to the club. But what does the brain say?
The brain as well says, I think that Jones will be there next year. Look, there's no doubt that he's at the back end of his career, and we can see that in other players throughout the league. When you look at Lewis on our side, you look at Roughhead at Hawthorn. Yeah. It's very obvious when they're in that rundown phase. They're not what they used to be, but at the end of the day, I can name 6 players at least on our list at the moment who I wouldn't have on the list next year, or more importantly, you wouldn't notice if they're not on the list next year. Jones has played every single game this season.
Yeah.
We don't need to be dropping a player who's that consistent at the moment. Next year, he might be only capable of playing 6 games, 12 games or something like that. But there's also the cultural aspect of keeping one of your current captains on the list. We saw how badly it was handled with Junior McDonald.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to go down that path again. And like I said, we've got 6 to 7 players who would easily be dropped out of the list at the moment before Nathan Jones would be. And I think the other question might be also around Jordan Lewis. Jordan's obviously on the way out. When that out happens, I'm not quite sure anymore. Earlier on in the season, I would have said to drop him certainly at the end of this season. But again, there's so many other players who are just not up to the standard that either Jones or Lewis are currently at and delivering, however badly, that moving 6 or 7 players out once you've got to be careful once you start to move more than that out about what you're replacing them with. I don't want to see us, say, dropping those two players, dropping 9 or 10 off the list, and then trying to replace them with a 17 or 18-year-old who's untried. At least we know what we're going to get with Lewis and Jones, for example. But I definitely keep Jones on. I hope he does sign. And I hope the club makes him an offer which is acceptable to keep him there.
Yeah, I agree. If you'd like to join the conversation tonight, 0390163666. That's 0390163666, or give us a call on Skype, Demonland31. Captaincy next year, go with a Jones-Viney combo, Viney solo, elevate Max to join Viney. Do you go something completely different and just go Max solo?
I'd like to hear your view on this rather than me giving the views all the time.
Well,
so over to you.
Over to me. Look, I think if Jones is going to be, if the club is sure that Jones isn't going to play the majority of the year, if he's going to perhaps be in that, definitely if they give him only 1 year, then maybe he steps aside the captaincy and it might be his decision to do it. I wouldn't want to push him out of that. Whether Viney goes solo, I've always liked just a solo captain. I'm not sure I'm a fan of the dual captaincy. I don't know, maybe that's just the traditionalist in me. I don't think they're going to strip Viney and Jones of it, and as much as I'd love to see Max personally as solo captain, I think if anything, Viney might be solo captain next year. But if they said it's going to be Jones and Viney, I won't complain. Jones has been a good stalwart of the club, and I certainly wouldn't rip the captaincy out of his hands. No.
Yeah, it's an interesting and complex situation, isn't it? I always like to compare what other clubs have done or tried to do in this situation. Hawthorn's probably the best example at the moment with Roughhead. They took the captaincy off him, and I think one of the important factors about a captain is they need to be reliable and need to be there every game, and that I think was one of the factors why Roughhead did stand down or they tapped him on the shoulder or whatever. I don't think Ben Stratton's even remotely as good a captain as what Roughhead has been over the years, but it's a good way to transition these retiring type players out. But just as equally, Hawthorn know how important it is to retain the culture of the club and not push those sort of icons of the clubs out. We can only wait and see.
I think Hawthorn knew that their Ruffy wasn't going to be playing the whole year, and I don't think you can possibly have a captain that's playing in the twos, and that's why I sort of made that comment that if Jones isn't going to be a 22, 23 game player, and if he's going to be in the twos, it's probably not a good look, your captain being in the twos. So that's why I thought if they exactly, sort of know that going in, but I don't know. It's a tough one.
It's a very difficult situation. And when you look at even Ollie Wines over at Port Adelaide playing in the Sandful instead, what sort of message is that sending to the team for this year and next year? Now, you need your captain off the ground at the end of the day, but we'll wait and see what comes out of the. I think the discussions about Jones continuing in the first place for next year, and I think we've got an off-field crew these days who hopefully won't repeat the failings of previous management, particularly in that Junior McDonald situation.
The standard of umpiring has been so poor this year. I think both supporters of both teams on the weekend would agree that the umpiring in the match was probably equally deplorable. I just don't know what the rule is for incorrect disposal. To highlight this, there was a Collingwood player just outside our goal square in our forward line who twice tried to change direction and was swung around in tackles trying to break through, and the ball ended up just spilling out. To me, that's clearly dropping the ball. But it was play on, no free kick. I see this week out in our games. I see this in games I watch on TV. Then you have a situation where a player gets tackled with no prior opportunity, is buried on the ground, and inexplicably a free's paid. There's just no consistency, and I've had a gutful.
Yeah, it's and I think that the situation is reflected virtually across every fan site and every fan in the AFL. It's not just exclusive to Melbourne. The frustration with the lack of capability and skills. I think it's also worthwhile having a look at the way the umpiring's handled in the VFL, for example. You may notice that there's a lot more of actually calling, making the calls in the VFL, as opposed to what we hear and see so often in the AFL of play on, play on, play on, or not making any call whatsoever. It seems that the umpires have almost been instructed it's better not to make a call than make a wrong call. But not making a call in some cases is the wrong call. I can tell a short story. I know there was a young kid that we used to work with who was an umpire up in, I think, around the Gisborne area or something like that, and who applied for the AFL umpiring roles. And it didn't matter how skilled or capable he was at actually umpiring the game. All that they were interested in was how fast he ran the 3K time trial. And I think that's a sad indictment of the priorities of the umpiring department and the way it's run at the moment. But again, that's a situation that is across the board. And I think also, unfortunately, the AFL is unwilling to address it, as along with a few other things, but they certainly need to address this in a big way. Professionalism would be a first step, but I think they really need to examine, as the AFL, about how they interpret various rules, because the spectators know when dropping the ball or holding the ball should be applied. It just isn't at the moment. And I think that sort of scenario also causes a lot of the congestion around the ball. Going back to the VFL, you may notice that the umpires will call the stacks on the mill, as it used to be called, and throw the ball up quickly and get the game going again. Whereas at the AFL level, they're looking around, they go left, they go right, call for who's the two ruckmen. Meanwhile, there's 36 players crowding around the ball and coming in. I think part of the problem that they're facing with congestion is also tied up to the way the umpires are umpiring the game.
The two All-Australian rucks seem to nullify each other. Grundy may have had more hit-outs and disposals, but Maxi had the better hit-out to advantage, and his disposal efficiency was higher than Grundy's. I was actually surprised that in a couple of the Team of the Weeks, I think Campbell Brown had one, and I think the AFL does one. They both had Grundy as the ruckman for the Team of the Week, and I didn't think Grundy dominated the ruck at all or the game, and I thought, well, how bad must have all the ruckmen in all the other games during the week must have been for Grundy to be the number one ruck for the week, because I think they just nullified each other. Where do you stand on whether who's going to get? Where do you think Max will get in the All-Australian squad and then get into the team? And who's going to be the number one ruck?
I think it'll be the same situation as last year, except reversed. Grundy and Gawn are absolutely streets ahead of any of the other ruckmen in the competition. Grundy's probably was slightly ahead in this particular game, but he's been playing on a winning side during the year. So I think Max will get put on the interchange bench and Grundy will get the first one. No big deal at the end of the day. We've got one of those two players playing for us, and that's the important thing. They're both great players, and we should applaud it. Yes, I think in this particular game, Grundy was slightly ahead, but thank goodness we've got Max and not not what a few other sides on the weekend had. And given that we're playing Sydney this coming week, I had a look at the stats for who was going to play ruck at Sydney. They had a young kid called McLean, I think it was McLean. I think it might have been his first game as well, and in the whole game, his grand total of hit-outs was 9.
Wow.
And they used Alir as the second ruck and Ben Reid as sort of a third stringer. Yeah. As a second string ruck, Alir had 10 hit-outs, so he had more hit-outs than their first ruck. So I'm hoping that this particular week, given because Sydney haven't got Sinclair playing, that I think Max might be able to give whoever turns up as ruck for Sydney a complete and utter bath, and hopefully provide our mids with plenty of opportunity.
This might be an unpopular, well, it's not an opinion. I just think they're going to go this way. I think Max will get into the squad, but I don't think he's going to even make the bench. I think they're going to go with a solo ruck this year and stack the team with mids. I hope I'm wrong. I believe he deserves another All-Australian gig and not just be in the squad. But I don't know. I just have that feeling that's the way they're going to go, probably because of the year that Melbourne has had. I hope Max does get recognised.
Top it up very nicely, wouldn't it?
Well, it definitely would. Speaking of disappointing, another disappointing crowd for a home game where we were once again outnumbered. No surprise. With the last 2 weeks, there's been shocking weather, and obviously the shocking displays we've been dishing up each week have kept our supporters away. The club must be pulling their hair out. Surely we're going to make another loss this year, considering we didn't have Anzac Day or Queen's Birthday. And we would have been banking on these last 3 home games to sort of assist on the bottom line. I can't imagine we're going to get a big crowd on Friday night either.
No, at the start of the season, I'm sure they would have banked on $40,000-$50,000 crowd for those games quite easily. But the weather conspired against us as well against Richmond and against Collingwood, just as everything else has conspired against this season. So no big change there, but it is disappointing. But it doesn't seem to be just confined to Melbourne at the moment. I know the weather in the last couple of weeks has been appalling. Certainly, people would have to find some real inspiration to turn up between the weather and the lack of trains and trams as well. But, just a couple of weeks ago, what was it, Hawthorn and North Melbourne played with 15,000 or something ridiculous at Etihad inside the roof.
Yeah.
So both of those teams had a lot to be playing for. So the numbers are across the board are down. And I think the AFL's got to look at the way that the season's structured and the impetus for people to come to the ground. I don't think the pre-game, mid-game, post-game entertainment or whatever it might be is working to attract the extra people to the game. But it's very sad from the club's perspective, because while we lost the home game on the Queen's Birthday, we surely would have made it up if Melbourne was challenging and the weather was fine against Collingwood at this point in the year.
I thought the whole 666 was meant to produce higher scoring games and bring people to watch it and come to the games and watch on TV, and I think it's backfired on them. Do you think they'll admit their defeat and go back, or?
No, I don't think they'll admit defeat by any stretch. They'll just stick with the bad things that they're doing at the moment. 666 has without a doubt done nothing in terms of improving the game in terms of congestion. The worst part is that it adds another 30 seconds while the umpire has to go around and count whether there's 6 players of either side in each of the zones and get the reports back from the various boundary umpires or whoever's down the other end of the ground that's the situation. We've got enough delays in the game at the moment. How about you just bounce the ball and get on with it? So it's adding nothing to what people want to see. Maybe that's why people aren't turning up.
Look, I was just thinking about the other fact that the runners can't come on the ground as much as well. That can be having an impact on some teams and how they perform, particularly if you don't have those older heads around that's more experienced that can sort of do the on-field sort of coaching. That can have an effect where you're not getting the messages out to players to be able to change things when things aren't going to plan, and could have hurt a club like us. I don't know how you sort of measure that or factor that in at all, but I think it's got to have had an impact. But I guess both teams that play are equally handicapped by that. But
yeah, it becomes critical when you witness a situation where a good player for any side is sitting on the bench and they can't get them back on the ground because the play's on the other side and they can't get a runner out to drag some player off. It's just a ridiculous situation, and I believe that for next year they're changing the excess of the runners back to probably something that we've seen before. I don't know exactly what the allowance will be, but it certainly hasn't been a move in the right direction, I don't think, for the game or for the coaches, and ultimately for particularly the younger players during this season.
Now, when we were talking about Maxi and Grundy before, I forgot to mention this, but Maxi was told to tag Grundy. What do you think of that move?
I thought that was a pretty good story, really. There's only two ruckmen on the ground, really, and for the two ruckmen to play on each other, I would have thought would have been a fait accompli. Was Grundy actually tagging Max, because they seem to be going up for the ruck contest together all the time together and running around the ground together.
Well, watching them, I didn't even have in my head that might be happening, but I believe Maxi did say that he was told to effectively tag Grundy, but I don't know.
I think that might have been Max having a lend of a journalist, more to the point.
I hope that's the case, because I don't know. That was a funny one.
What else would he have done?
Yeah.
Maybe he should have gone to side.
Yeah, well, else was, so he might have.
Yeah. Speaking of ruckman, we've got a situation this week of Braden Pruce in the Casey game had 75 hit-outs and 19 disposals. Are we going to overlook that performance again? He's obviously it's a different level of competition, but of all the players available at Casey, he was a standout this week. So.
It's an interesting one. That I would assume if Cox had been playing against Collingwood, I would have thought maybe they would have played him, but I don't know. I think the coaches this year have baffled me sometimes, and I don't know. I was bullish on giving Pruce a go, but having watched, I don't know if he's ready for the big leagues yet, but having seen him play a couple of games, but then he keeps killing it in the twos, so I don't know. That's a tough one. And if you're saying that there's
sorry,
I was just saying if you're saying that the Sydney ruck stocks aren't so beefed up, I don't know if he'll get a game.
Yeah, and to be truly cynical, Casey's situation is that they're in the finals in the 8 at the moment by 2 points, but Hawthorn have a game over them. So Casey need to win their last game against Frankston, I think it is this week, and Hawthorn have to drop one of their 2 remaining games. And I think having Pruce in the side might be the difference between Casey making a final or not.
Yeah, well, you know what? I don't think he'll play this week in the ones. If, as you said, I don't think Sydney's rucks are going to bother just having Max. So, let's play for Casey.
Yeah, and I think Marty Hoare would be the logical inclusion for the coming week as well. He had 25 disposals and apparently was playing very well for Casey this week. And we've lost May, of course, in the back line. So it'll be seemed to be a fait accompli again that Hoare should come back this week.
Well, last week, after he had last week's podcast, we were sure that Hoare would be getting a game this week, as in the Collingwood game. after 34 possessions, and was shocked on Thursday night when he wasn't picked. But you would think with May out this week, he's a shoe-in to come in.
Yeah, and we need Oscar up forward, of course, so he can't drop that.
That's true. There was a thread this week about the Lever trade. I think it's way too early to sort of say whether we've lost out on that.
I don't get hooked, get too uptight about trades and whether we've won or lost. It's like buying a house. There's never a sale or a buy unless both parties agree. So at the particular point in a trade, it's the same situation. Unless somebody's prepared to take it and somebody's prepared to give it, it doesn't happen. You only find out later on whether it's been good or bad, but it's what you did at the time. So I'm glad that we've got a part player of his capability and potential playing for us. We haven't seen it yet. He's had an appalling run with injury, so we've just got to wait for him to come good, hopefully from that perspective. But also the times that he has played, Stephen May hasn't been there, or Jetta hasn't been there, or Hibberd hasn't been there. It's particularly hard to judge on whether he's going to be an influence into the future when the whole back line is a patched together form of defence at the moment. We've just got to wait and see.
Yeah, I agree. We learned this week that chief strategist of the team, Craig Jennings, will be leaving at the end of the year. He'll join McCartney leaving as well. Do you think there'll be more culling of assistants before the end of the year?
I think there's no doubt about that, but it's not just at Melbourne. Apparently, the agreement with the Assistant Coaches Association, whatever that might be, or the Coaches Association, is that all the assistants have to be told about their future by the 1st of August. We've announced a couple. There's a couple of other clubs have already started to announce people who won't be around next year. The big question is going to be who replaces them, and that'll be of more interest to the Demonlanders in the coming weeks than anyone else, because I'm sure most people on Demonland haven't got the faintest about who Craig Jennings is and what he does and whether he's actually any good at his job or not, because I certainly don't, but you've just got to take the word of others. But we'll wait and see. But I think there's, in terms of the assistants, now's the time. Given our situation this year and the results this year, one of the few things you can change is either a coach or assistant coach. You can't readily change players, or certainly can't do that as easily. So I've got no doubt there'll be further changes occurring in the assistant coaching area for the coming year.
The sad news during the week was that 6-time premiership player Frank Bluey Adams passed away. That's very sad news indeed. A 6-time premiership player. They don't grow on trees.
Yeah, it's remarkable when you look at his history. The people on this podcast and a lot of people on Demonland won't have ever even seen a Melbourne premiership. And here's a guy who's played in 6 of them and played in 6 premierships over a 166 game career. It is just incredible. Michael Tuck played in 7, but he had to play 429 games to do that. Bluey played in 11 consecutive final series. And here we are sitting on Demonland, hoping and praying that one day we might get to see a premiership, let alone getting into the finals. And here's a bloke who's played in 6 of them. It's just incredible to think that that's the situation. And then if you look at the Melbourne site today, there's a rundown on Bluey's the 1955 grand final when he rushed off the bench and took out himself and Des Healy It's credited as being the shortest game of grand final for an individual player ever, probably less than 30 seconds. But at the end of the day, he got a premiership medal or whatever they handed out in those days for doing it. So, but again, it's very sad that we're losing people like Bluey, and we've lost the players from that remarkable and glory years of the Melbourne Football Club, and that we haven't. I think I heard Bluey saying at some stage on some interview he couldn't believe that, having played in the 1964 grand final, that he wouldn't see another Melbourne premiership in his lifetime. And it's quite an incredible thought from that respect, but it's very sad to lose these people again.
It is indeed. Well, just looking at our injury list, we've had more players be put out for the season, but given that there's only 2 games to go, anyone with any type of small injury is going to be out for the season. But Hannon is now out for the rest of the year, and so is Tim Smith, the unluckiest footballer going around. And then there was the news during the week that Corey Maynard will be hanging up the boots at the end of the year just because of just can't get his body right. Also, one of the unluckiest players going around, just couldn't get a run at games consecutive. Yeah,
Corey provided a lot of hope and promise, but it was remarkable how he just couldn't get on the ground. And it'll be interesting, given Corey only managed the one game. One game, I think it was, in Canberra about 2 years ago. But what do we do with AVB at the end of the season? Who's managed 7 games in 3 years or something ridiculous like that. I'd love to have him out on the ground, and I would have loved to have seen Corey Maynard out on the ground. But what does the club and the list management people do at the end of the year with those sort of players? But look, we are doing exactly what everyone's been calling for the last couple of months on Demonland. At least when we get to this stage of the year, there is no point trying to get these players off. Just send them off for their surgery, get them right so that on the 1st of November or whenever they come back for the pre-season training, they're ready to get out there and run. It's no use trying to put numbers on the park just with players who are already injured. Just call it quits for this year. Nothing is going to change, really. We all live in hope that we might win a game or maybe even 2 games in the last 2 games. But really, when we get to round 1 next year, we'd be wishing and hoping that we hadn't tried to play, a Stephen May in the last 2 games or something like that when he injured his hamstring even worse than what it might be today. So.
Yeah, I'd be sending anyone who needs a surgery as soon as possible. Obviously, if they're fit enough to play now, but not like bringing Stephen May back in who actually has a hamstring. But as soon as the season's over, I'd get everyone that needs surgery in because we don't need a situation like last year happening again. We want come November 1st or whenever it is, players to be. And I like what Paul Roos said, and he'd like to see some senior players there on the first day, and I think I'd like that too.
Yeah, indeed. I mean that's seen as sending a message to all the younger players and setting that good example. And boy, do we need it at the moment, particularly from those senior players. And really, there's a lot of those senior players that are actually injured and off the list at the moment, so there's no good reason why they can't be there on the 1st of November. You can forgive someone like a Jonesy who may not be able to turn out because he's potentially played every single game of the year. But I'm hoping that someone like Tommy Mackle would be there on the first day to show the younger ones what to do and what's to be expected. Because just as well, we're probably going to have a whole stack of young ones available to us this year who need to be shown the way.
Exactly. Is there anything else, George?
The only other things I think there was that bit of good news during the week about the redevelopment available at Casey, where the state government's kicking in, I think, a $6 million, and Casey Council or someone else is kicking in about $2 million to create a decent VFLW and AFLW, in particular, training centre at Casey Fields. I think that's great from the women's team perspective, but also no doubt there'll be flow-on effects to the Casey side and also the Melbourne players who are playing in and around the Casey area as well. So getting that money and to be able to build those facilities, we all know about the lack of facilities that Melbourne's faced over the years. I think will be a great fill-up to the club, and particularly in the women's side of it. Let's hope that by annual general meeting time this year that there can be something more definitive about a permanent long-term training base for the main AFL list, because that's just as, or perhaps even more important than what's happening down at Casey. Although it's great news that the club has been able to negotiate, a spare $8 million to be able to get that up. And apparently, it's due to start being built in September and available and completed by next April. So that's a good time to get those things up and running as well. We won't be missing out on too much.
That's fantastic. It'd be great for as you said, our senior team to find a home base and somewhere we can really call our own. And hopefully they're, well, from what I've heard, that he whispers here and there that could be close. So good news.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, just as another little aside on finance, which is one of my other favourite things in life. There was an article in the Age today about the Melbourne Cricket Club and the profit that they have made. They've got assets currently of $350 million, and they made $17 million profit last year. And I dare say that most of that profit was not from cricket. It's a result of it's been a result of the football that's played at the ground. But there was an interesting comment at the bottom of it, which said, while Eminem and Bon Jovi concerts are great money spinners, committee members will tell you they are nothing compared to the pulling power of Collingwood and Melbourne being in form. I suspect that's from Melbourne last year, not this year, but it does show the importance of the Melbourne Football Club to the MCC. And the real pity is that, Melbourne Football Club seems to be almost on the begging bowl situation time and time again, and the MCC is doing very well out of our presence, and other clubs as well. But would have been what could have been in the past. We just have to deal with now. But the MCC is doing very nicely in terms of profit. That's good to hear.
Well, look, I think we would, if we were able to have sustained success for more than 1 year in a row, and something like 4, 5, 6 years in a row, like the CEO mentioned during the week, if we had, that sustained success, you would see our coffers filling up. But unfortunately, if you are going to have a year like we had, and year on year on year, like we had for the last 12 years prior to 2018, who's going to go watch that on a,
Yeah, and from the finance perspective, these things have long-term effects, that, like I said, the 12 previous years, football clubs are designed not to make profits as such, but the bits and pieces that you put in the bank every year make your life a lot easier in the coming year. It means you can get better coaches, better facilities, better recruiting staff, multiples of those sort of people, although the AFL's put caps on it. But the reality is that having money in the bank enables you to have lots of options for the future. And we've been the poor brethren of the MCC for a long, long time now, and it's been doubly compounded by the fact that we just haven't had success that causes people to turn up to games or want to turn up to games. And it was really encouraging, particularly in that final series last year, to watch 90,000 people turn up to a game, and I reckon even in that Geelong game there was 80,000 Melbourne supporters. It was quite remarkable. So if we can get that success, then that will lead to further success. That's the Hawthorn story all over again. They've done it very successfully, but their success was based in the 80s and 90s, and only continued in their benefit from that success, 15 and 20 years later into their most recent run of premierships. Let's hope that happens to us one day.
Here. All right, George. Thank you very much for joining me tonight on the podcast. It's good to have you, and I hope we hear from you more often. It's good to have some new blood on the podcast.
Old blood.
Thank you
very
much
for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Not a problem. We'll be back next week, same time, same channel. Guys, the season's almost over, but not quite, because I'm sure George will feature quite heavily in trade week and in the draft. So there'll be plenty more Demon content. But only 2 more weeks to suffer through of the 2019 season, and then we can turn off our TVs and radios and internet.
Come on, we got to win this week, aren't we? Surely against you. Come on.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm happy with pick 2. We're not tanking. No tanking here. But let's just forget this year. But yeah, we might win. Anyway, it might make it more enjoyable to talk about the team next week. All right, guys, we'll be back next week. Thank you, George. Thank you to Barb, who called in for a couple of minutes early in the program, a couple of seconds, actually. We love calls, so get your calls in next week. All right, go D's.
Come on, Demon, you got